Hope this week is turning out to be all that you hoped it would be, uh, or even better, because that would be key. Today we're going to talk about the Norse god Tyr. What a wonderful representation of what we can be. I'm particularly fond of the Norse god Tyr because my great grandfather was named after him. My great grandfather Tyrion was named particularly for the Germanic god Tyr. Now, we know Tyr, of course, comes from the Germanic tribes really before they became what is known as the Norse. So, much more of a longer history. Today, before I get started, as always, I want to give a huge shout out, there it is, to newrealitytv.com. They have a wonderful plethora of different programs and shows that really can give us a different perspective on our own spiritual journeys and to maybe provide that piece of intellect that we've been looking for to kind of fill in the blanks. All right. So hopefully you will check them out. Again, that's newrealitytv.com. And for a small subscription cost, you can actually get monthly subscription to all types of shows that can hopefully offer you some additional intellect and wisdom along our spiritual journey. I also, for those of you who happen to have a few extra coins, there it is. If you want, you can hit up the tip jar, and by all means, please leave what you can. As we travel around the country and the state, it's always good to have a little bit more support. So, would very much appreciate that. And finally, for those of you who want to support us and be a part of all that we're about, you're welcome to check out my website, NorseWhispers.com. There you can also go to /our friends and see all of the individuals who have supported me and the show and the message worldwide. So wonderful group of people whom I am absolutely enthralled with. So, but today we're talking about Tyr, and we're talking about courage. But we're going to talk about two forms of courage today. We're going to talk about intrinsic courage and extrinsic courage. We'll start by talking about our intrinsic courage. The intrinsic courage that we need to have is the ability to see past our bravado and our ego to who we really are. I am always reminded as I begin my life of communicating with my grandfathers and my ancestors. One of the things that I really have come to embrace is that this life is filled with emotional experiences. And when we're not willing or we're too wanting to shield ourselves from the from any types of feeling like we're vulnerable or that we just don't want to go there for comfort's sake. We're really depriving ourselves of the experience that we're meant to have here in this physical realm. Our life's journey from the time we're born to this physical plane to the time we leave it is an emotional understanding of what makes us feel certain ways and why do we feel that way. There are so many circumstances that we will find ourselves throughout this physical journey that begs us to reevaluate how we feel along the way, understanding that we are physically changing as we alter our DNA along our lifetime. And so our brain's interpretation of these physical sensory inputs and the spiritual input all kind of can be manipulated in a different way based on this manipulation of our DNA, on the basic building blocks of who you are as a person. So we have these building blocks that are being manipulated, some of them being excited differently along the way. And so we find ourselves really changing not only our physical form, but certainly our mindset about many different things, particularly as we learn more and we process more. Those are all going to become part of who we are, who we become. Okay? Now, one of the other things we've spoken about in the past is the rocks at the bottom of our well. Now, for those of you who have not heard this analogy, think of those core values of who makes you you. Not when you're trying to appease someone else, but when you're truly yourself. You're truly looking deep within, is very akin to seeing a collection of beautiful rocks at the bottom of a well. Between you and these beautiful rocks is water. Now, this water has a tendency to be stirred up, and when it's stirred up, of course, it becomes very murky. It's hard to see the rocks. We have other people, other existences on the physical plane with us who are going to attempt to throw rocks into our well, right? So we have to kind of defend against these rocks, particularly those rocks that are very muddy, okay? So it's very important that we're kind of, if we want to be able to see the beauty and let that beauty come through the water and out the well, we need to maintain the clarity of that water, right? So in this analogy, the rocks at the bottom, this beautiful mosaic of rocks at the bottom, represent our core values, who we are, what we stand for, what we really, really hold as the foundations of all of that we will be. Okay, so we look at in ancient Norse. The ancient Norse had a collection, and you'll hear many of these in many mantras throughout the generation, is they had 9 noble virtues. And these 9 noble virtues were things like courage and truthfulness and honor and hospitality and generosity and those types of just core values that made them who they were. All of their life's decisions were based on those core values. Those core values are the beautiful rocks at the bottom of our well. Now, many times in life, things get kind of hectic and kind of busy, and we find that the water between us and these beautiful rocks becomes murky. It becomes confusing, and there's so many different things going on in our lives that we're having a hard time seeing the rocks at the bottom of the well. Well, as is always, when we look at the rune Yura, we look at, Yura tells us, and Yura is very kin to that. Yura says that everything has a season, everything has a timing, but it's not really like you can set your watch by it. As much it is the kind of the cyclic effect, if you will. So it's the inhale of oxygen drives the exhale, right? So we can't always inhale. We have to exhale sometimes too, right? This is very akin to Mother Yord, the universe, all of the things in time. So they're in this cycle, right? And one part of the cycle drives the other part. Day drives night, night drives day, right? Inhale drives exhale, exhale drives inhale. All of these things, while being interconnected, are different pieces of the cycle. Now, these are, as we look at our values and the murkiness of the water on top of the rocks, we know that when we still our mind and we just relax, we focus, we just relax, let all of those stresses go away. When we do this, the water within our well can become clear. It settles. And we're able to see those values at the bottom of this well, right? This is very much the same idea about finding our core values, of finding out who we are as people. But a lot of times, this requires courage, because sometimes we don't like to look at the hard things. We don't want to push those things away out of our focus, out of our concentration, because we're holding on to them for some perceived importance or perceived values. Now, I'm going to use the word perceived because chances are it's not very important in the big picture of things. However, we happen to have a temporary perception that it is, and so it's kind of helping us, hindering us by murking up this water, right? And not allowing the true value way at the bottom to shine through. Many times, as I've worked with many different individuals, ego and bravado kind of get in the way of this. And we kind of say, oh, I got to be this, or I got to be that, or I can't fall for this, or I can't fall for that. I'm always reminded, my sons, wonderful men, both, or all four of them actually, are all wonderful men, and or will be when they grow up a little bit more. But they always say to me, "Oh, that's no, I don't want to invest in emotional responses." Right? So, for those of you who's this analogy of Old Yeller, it was a television program where at the end, of course, spoiler alert, the dog passes the physical realm. And so, how many men cried during that scene? Well, no, we're not going there. We're too tough for that. We're too manly for that. Hogwash. Baloney. The only one you're fooling is you. The rest of us know you have to have emotion, and you have to display and understand the influences of that emotion. Even if you don't display it, even if you don't want to express your emotion, embracing that emotion is critical to growing. Otherwise, you kind of stay at this level field, right? You'll never ascend to all that you can be, your potential, right? So that's kind of up this incline of an emotional journey. We have to feel, because it's the feels, it's the emotional influence that alters our thought process, sets our emotional filters, and is stored in our memories. I'm reminded my grandchildren have a saying now, and I'm trying to understand it. And they say meh, or meh, and it means whatever, right? It's neither here nor there, just meh. And I tell them, don't be meh. Don't be meh. Embrace the emotion, whichever it is, whether it's a sad emotion, whether it's a happy emotion. You want to embrace these because it's your emotional journey that teaches you your path. It's our emotions that sets our emotional filters, and then from that moment, it changes the way we see our reality. It alters it. So we're not seeing it the way we could see it. I don't want to use the word the way we should see it, because your path is yours to divine. You can do whatever you wish with your path. Growth is on this emotional incline. That's where the growth comes from. That's where I can learn to understand what euphoria means to me. To be euphoric, to be joyful and gleeful, and all of the things that this lifetime has to offer me. I was also told by my Greek grandfather that when we depart our physical form at the end, when we ascend into the spiritual realm, we can't create emotion anymore. That's no longer a thing, because it is our physical form that creates the chemistry, that creates the emotion. Okay? And so when we depart our physical form, all of a sudden, we can't create new emotion. We can remember the emotions that we've had, and we can look at, or see, I should say, our descendants who are saying, this is how I feel and this is why I feel this way. We can associate those emotional memories to that instance, but we can't create new emotion, right? We can't do that because we don't have a physical form to create the chemistry. So the physical form is there to create this chemistry. Those are the hormones within your systems that are released in your bloodstream based on a command in your brain that releases these hormones. When the brain receives it again, it kind of does this comparison. We talked about it yesterday, where we're comparing what this chemical composition looks like to our little recipe book, and to decide which emotion we're feeling. Okay? This is super important, because if for some reason you were to become traumatized, receive some overwhelming traumatic event into our sensory input, this recipe book could get damaged. And very often that's what happens. And particularly if we're shielding ourselves, right, from emotional damage, right? So we're going to put up that wall to make sure that we don't get any more hurt than we could already be. So we're going to put up that wall, and sometimes that book, that recipe book, gets left outside. And so as we gain experiences now following that, and we're gaining experiences, our brain doesn't know what we're feeling. It's just it got energy that was released with the chemistry, right? Chemistry made it back into the brain, and the brain looked at the chemical composition and went, Oh, okay. Because there is no recipe book over here, right? So, because it's outside this shield that we put up to prevent damage. This shield that we're putting up that could prevent us from seeing the recipe book is our ego, right? So our ego kind of steps in the way there, and now we can't read our recipe book. So we really don't know what this chemical composition is now. So this brings us to our second part of courage, and that is the courage to have these experiences, to watch Old Yeller, and to actually process that emotion. This is the same process that we have to look at from a compartmentalized perspective when we deal with high end trauma or bulk trauma. As the trauma comes into our processing, we have to maintain a little bit of headspace way up top here. And that little bit of headspace then becomes our cognitive space, where we can think about this trauma that we've just experienced and we can kind of chunk it down, right? So we're going to kind of break it down because many people, when they see a mountain, of course, it's a mountain. It can be overwhelming. But when we look at one piece of the journey, one leg of this expedition, we find ourselves at a place where we can tackle just that one. And then we look at the next one and we conquer that one. And then so on and so forth until finally reaching the pinnacle. This is the same thing we're going to do with these emotional mass traumas, right? So we're going to look at it. We're going to use our little bit of cognitive space to then break it down and deal with each of the pieces individually. This allows us to then be able to better manage it and, of course, maintain our mental space. So it's very critical that we're able to understand the value, the incredible value of emotions in our journey. Now, many people have said, "Well, I only do that when I'm meditating. I only deal with emotions." Well, that's silly, because if you think that you're preventing yourself from feeling what you were feeling in your normal life, not happening. Okay, they're one and the same. Our spiritual journey is the same thing as our physical journey. They're one and the same. For when we come to this place where we spend some time in maybe quiet meditation, we're gaining access to the spiritual realm through our spiritual mind, and we're focusing on that. The emotions that we had in our physical life are still there. They're not going anywhere, right? And the memories of that are there too, right? So we have these emotions that stay with us regardless whether we're going through some rote act of spirituality or we're just taking out the trash in the morning. Matters not. Your emotional journey is your emotional journey, which is the same thing as your physical lifetime or our spiritual journey. They're all one and the same. So, understanding the emotional values of our experiences, of the way we're interpreting the reality at which we are existing, is very critical to helping us maintain a better mental space. In the beginning of today's show, we were talking about the well and the rocks at the bottom of the well, the water in the well. When we focus, or when we spend our lifetime, our physical lifetime, in a place that we are not congruent, right? Here's our line of congruence. And we're stepping outside of that line of congruence to hopefully associate with some community, some group of people. When we're stepping outside the boundary, this delta now, the difference between our line of congruence and where we are currently, becomes a stressor. It becomes a little stack at the bottom of our bandwidth, right? Our processing bandwidth. It becomes a little stack. And the more that we do that to the more people, say we're being, and I'll use the term fake, modern term, but when we're being fake, we have a delta here, and that delta creates a stress, which takes up some of our bandwidth. Okay, now the more we do that, the more we're taking up. Okay, so we're slowly creeping away and taking away some of our processing, some of our bandwidth. Now what happens is life deals us this traumatic event through our experiences, and that trauma just hits us like a truck, right? It's a huge thing, and it's going to take up as much processing as available. Now what happens is many times that traumatic event, because of these small stressors, it's going to try to fit in what's left. Now the problem is we're going to overwrite the cognitive space. So we're just going to absorb that into this trauma. Now we don't have the cognitive space to chunk things down. So it's just all overwhelming and hitting us full force. Okay? This is why many people have challenges, quite a bit of challenges with these either perceived or truly experienced traumatic events psychologically. Why? Because now we've absorbed all the bandwidth that we have in our mind to processing this event, this emotional event, and we just don't have the bandwidth to do that. It happens frequently. And it doesn't have to be a truly experienced event. It can simply be a perceived event that does this trauma. Many times they're kind of collectively put together. So we experience a certain amount of trauma and we perceive a larger trauma. Okay? It's all processing, trying to be processed through the brain. Now, when we run out of the cognitive space, we may actually step into some of our basic programming, some of our basic human functionality, where we begin to have physiological symptoms as well. We're overrunning the system, and so very painful. So today, as we focus on Tyr and his ventures into helping us to understand courage, I want us to each embrace courage, our own courage, see past our bravado, to see past our ego and who we really are, and live that and be that. Whatever that is, it is who you are. Be that. And you will see your stress begin to reduce. Move that out of there, and now we have more bandwidth to process these emotional experiences that we have in this lifetime. Very important. All right? So I hope you will embrace your own courage, because you have courage, my friends. You have so much courage, and you are so talented. I know that this will be easy for you to handle. All right? So I wish you the very best Tears Day. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we celebrate the wisdom of Wotan, or Othin. And we celebrate the understandings, certainly, that the spirit realm gives us. All right? So I hope you have a wonderful day. Love and light, my friends.